Aloha and welcome to A Word with Ward. I'm Representative Gene Ward and we're broadcasting live from the Capitol at Baratania Street, the square building, better known as the Hawaii State Capitol. We generally bring you leaders and we bring you topics, and today we got really a big interesting one. We have Ted Ralston, who's going to talk all you ever wanted to know about drones. Ted, welcome to the program. We're going to have a word with Ward about what's going on out there, what's flying all around, and what are these things all about? But first, let the people know who you are, some of your background. Give us an overview of who they know is talking about drones and what his background is.
Yeah, very interesting subject, sir. I'm glad to be here on the show. Thanks very much for setting us up and inviting me on. So I'm actually at UH right now, running as the director of what's called the Pan-Pacific Unmanned Air Systems Test Range Complex. Did you get that?
That's a long one. How long has that been in existence? I'm sure that too many people know about that.
That's exactly probably right. It was created right here in this building in the legislature in 2015. Some funding was released to go let Hawaii become associated with Alaska and Oregon in this FAA test range.
When we become that national test area, they created that. And that position that you are in.
Right, and it now has a really long name. Pan-Pacific Unmanned Air Systems Test Range Complex. There's a reason for each word. I can go through them, but I don't think we want to waste the audience's time with that level of detail.
Bumper sticker versions.
Let's call it the test range, the Hawaii test range.
What about the background of Ted? The guy who runs that test range is what?
That would be me.
Some of your coordinates.
Yeah, well, I'll be glad to do that. I born and raised in Waimanalo and Kailua and Lanikai, and then went off to school in the mainland. And like all of us who went to engineering school, we disappeared, lived on the mainland for many years in aeronautical engineering in my case, and retired, and have come back here and been helping the university for some time in a volunteer status, mentoring some student programs in the world of UAVs, unmanned air systems, drones, whatever you want to call them. And when the job opening occurred last year, based on this 2015 legislative action, I applied for it and got selected. So we've been moving for about 6 months, maybe 5 months now, getting Hawaii lined up procedurally and legally, and getting our thoughts lined up to go off and pursue this actually piece of business.
So you're the go-to man. If anybody is at front and center what's going on with the drones, it's you. Because you know we had 25 bills in the legislative session, and I don't think any of them got through because it's still a very big mystery. So let's kind of unpack the mystery. When we say drone, you know, in politics, perception is reality, but we want to talk about facts of what drones are, what they're not. And a lot of people out there think, well, if we're talking about drones, we're talking about those things that come over and bomb people in Afghanistan, or the ones that now the newest image is they come and they peek in my bathroom window when they're hovering around my house. So when we talk about a drone, what size, shape, impact, knowledge, etc. should we know about it?
Well, you know, that whole range is actually there within the domain of drones, but actually the drone most people are familiar with is their washer and dryer at home. You put the wash in, hit the button, and the thing runs a cycle all by itself, right? That's a perfect example of a drone. But what we are, I think we're probably misusing that term.
I thought drones had to fly.
Not necessarily. The type we're speaking of are unmanned air systems, which is composed of 3 parts. There's an unmanned air vehicle, which means it's something that flies, and there's nobody on it, so it's unmanned. There's a communication link through radio communication, and then there's going to be a ground station of some kind that's receiving that communication and allowing a human operator who's on the ground to control that vehicle in the air. That's really an unmanned air system. And I think commonly when we say drones, we mean something like that these days.
What's the size from the smallest to the largest?
You can get them is so small they'll fit in the palm of your hand, and even smaller than that, all the way to you name it. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, FedEx would like to have a 747 cargo airplane with nobody on board flying cargo across the Pacific. So that's 1.2 million pounds of airplane. So all the way from a hummingbird size to a 747, anything in that range can be.
I think the 747 is probably, because they have automatic pilot now, or when there's fog and clouds, they basically put the thing on their computer, landing and take off.
It's not quite, that's
I'm simplifying.
Hollywood does that.
Oh, by the way,
right.
He's a pilot also, so he can say these things.
Hollywood can do that, but not quite in reality.
But my impression, because I've been an advocate of new technologies, and particularly driverless cars, and I know they're coming down the line 3 to 4 to 5 years, and hopefully it's going to take the place of mass transit. We're not going to go there, but it's the new technology that we're going to take advantage of. But for now, what are some of the things that drones are being used for in Hawaii, particularly at
in Hawaii, there's quite a wide range of uses, and all the way from our power company doing inspection of the power grid and the poles and such in really extreme areas, which takes a man out of the picture. That is, a man is no longer put at risk hanging out of a helicopter or climbing a ladder. You can
cost has got to be a big issue.
Cost and safety are the two big things driving industry in that direction. Coral reef analysis, seacoast erosion, beach erosion, environmental threats to species and such, all that can be examined and even maybe corrected. There's even some discussion about mosquito-borne illness eradication by drone. That is,
that's interesting.
Yeah, you can, if you can't get to where the pond is, where the mosquitoes are breeding, get a drone in there and drop off whatever you have to drop off to take care of that piece of the population.
Well, so drones are not just now camera drones, they are carriers and droppers. In fact, I was remembering ISIS is doing a little bit of
they are doing
mini bombing of that.
Yep.
So these things, in terms of what you said about the mosquitoes,
yep,
exactly, dropping stuff in the ponds to keep the the
like inert mosquitoes themselves, which then breed and the population declines. Or drones can act as a radio relay. If you have a situation where during a disaster, for example, you've lost communication, and you're down in a valley, in some deep valley, a drone acting as a radio relay can fly high over the valley and provide internet and communication services to that element of the population. You could deliver lightweight but high-value items like prescriptions and blood plasma and this sort of thing. A really interesting one. Had some discussion here at the Aviation Caucus that Senator Kahele and Representative McKelvey put together a couple of months ago. The issue was getting lab samples from some of the remote hospitals, like Lanai City Hospital, over to the area where they can be analyzed before they expire. And if there's no commercial, if there's not a high rate of commercial air traffic, maybe a drone system.
That saves lives.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Saves money, time, the whole process.
Yep.
But unfortunately, a lot of the people have an image that if this is a drone, there's got to be something about Big Brother. There's got to be something about the danger of what it may be doing, and I don't see it or I don't know it. What are some of the guidelines? Like you mentioned, DLNR goes to do some of the coral. Maybe HECO does, so it's electrical lines. What are the requirements for people to be able to do a drone? Because a lot of people probably have gone on Amazon and there's $300 ones or something that they can just pick up and start flying it without any restrictions.
We have a lot of education to go through to get people to see the whole picture, and there's kind of a range of different rule sets you have to think about. There's federal law, federal rules that the FAA mandates. There's state laws that the state, of course, takes care of. There's city laws and the Parks and Recreation Department and such, and then there could be various forms of private landowner issues. So there's a number of things you have to think of. You got to line them all up, understand what the limits are, and work your procedures, your memos of understanding, your licenses and certifications. Line them all up so you can actually go.
So Ted, let's assume that somebody out here is listening who just bought one of the Amazon $300 drones. What can they do, how do they meet those criteria without being in jeopardy?
That's becoming more of a problem, because as the FAA and the states and such are creating rules, it makes it more, the obligation's on the user to understand what those rules are, even though they're arcane and hard to get a hold of. And it's your job.
Multi-level.
Yeah, and you're obligated to go find out those rules and then comply. And one of the major compliance issues is all drones above a half a pound have to be registered. Anything bigger than the palm of your hand.
Your hummingbird example.
Hummingbird, right? That doesn't have to be registered, but anything bigger than a minor bird drone has to be registered.
So half a pound?
Yep, half a pound or up.
Has to be registered.
And you have to have a registration number on the vehicle, and there's two different forms of registration, and it depends. If you're operating in the recreation class, the hobbyist class, there's one form of registration. If you're operating in the commercial class, there's a different form of registration.
Which means you're making money with it if it's commercial class.
Right.
But for the hobbyist who I'm assuming is watching, all they got to do is get a registration. Federal, state, where do they get the
registration? It's a federal registration.
How do they do it?
There's a website on the FAA. Just go to FAA drones, and it wouldn't take you long to find the regestration site.
FAA drone, you Google FAA drone registration.
FAA drones registration, and you'll come up with a registration page.
Do they have to pay money?
$5 a head.
For how long?
2 years.
Well, that's not so bad.
Insignificant. And it provides a database, but the trick is, and this is the clever part on the FAA's part, when you sign up for that registration, you also have to check that you will understand, know, and follow the various rule sets that exist. And then, and if you get your license as well, similar obligations come forth. So there's an obligation here that we all have.
What are the behaviors or the do's and don'ts that come out with this registration?
There's flight parameters like altitude, that you can't exceed 400 feet. You can't do it beyond line of sight.
400 feet, that's like a football field plus some up in the air.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of high.
That's reasonable. It's
can't exceed that.
Can't exceed that.
If you're doing commercial or just hobby.
Right.
Okay.
And you can get a waiver. If you have a commercial certificate, a commercial pilot's license for drones, you can apply for a waiver to get above 400 feet if you want to, but there's not much need for that.
But for the small guys, 400 feet,
400 feet, right.
What are the other guidelines for the small guys?
Daylight only, okay, no nighttime. So all the stuff you see down at the Hilton on Friday nights at the fireworks, most of that's outside the rules. Can't fly over people. Unless the people are you and me and directly involved in the operation. And what fly over people means, what do you mean fly over people? It means you as the user have to mitigate all possible risks that could occur of that drone hitting somebody. That means you have to cognitively think through, how can this thing fail? The motors can fail, the GPS can fail, comms can fail, battery can fail, all this stuff can fail. The thing can hit a bird. Wherever the failure might occur, whatever the path is that drone takes after the failure, whatever that perimeter is, you got to
when
consider that a
drones
setback.
crash, do they go down or do they go?
They can go both. When they lose power, they have to come down. They have no choice but to come down.
But I mean, like fast, or do they glide? Because
they're gonna, if it's a
well, they don't have wings actually.
Well, the winged ones will glide quite nicely. The ones that are quad rotors and such will just come down like a baseball coming down.
So when you say they can't be over people, that's saying urban areas. Even right. Can you fly over houses?
You can fly over houses if it's your house, if you have permission from the landowner, but you can't fly over someone's house that you don't know. No more than an airplane. You have to obey the same rules that airplanes obey. Airplanes have to fly 1,000 feet if they're flying over your house, right? And
no, I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
They can get that 1,000 feet
over. Yeah,
they can go that far down.
That's pretty high. Minimum.
That's pretty noisy too.
But the point, that's a good point. Noise is a good point, if I can suggest. And the other one is privacy. Because people have the right to expect that whatever privacy they've enjoyed up to this point is maintained now that we have drones. So whatever the penetration of your privacy is by walking by your house, by going by in a bus, or by flying over in an airplane with an unaided eye, that kind of defines the parameters of privacy. And drones can't violate that. And the people have the right to expect that the government will make sure that right is upheld.
Who polices drones?
Really interesting problem.
Are you the policeman for the University of Hawaii drones?
You would be, the policeman who's going to take care of this problem will never sleep because it's going on all the time. And a legitimate operator and an illegitimate operator both look the same. The drones both look the same. And they behave the same. So it's really hard to tell who's got licenses and permits and has all these letters of agreement in place and who doesn't. So it is a really tough situation that's a little bit frustrating to the enforcement agencies these days.
Kind of the wild, wild west a little bit.
A lot of people use that term. Where have you been?
I was intuiting it from the way you described it. Well, we got a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
It's a lot of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Exactly right.
So the use of it in its very excellent way of reconnaissance and health and safety and saving of life has the downside, and without enforcement, it's like when they tell us in the legislation, you can pass all the bills you want, but if you don't have enforcement. Would the first thing when you would be accosted by a police or an enforcement officer, you have to produce a license and say, I'm licensed? Is it something you carry in your wallet?
Oh yeah, I can show you one here, what a license looks like.
Is it like driver's license?
It's just a plastic certificate with your name on it and your date of birth and your color of your eyes and all that sort of thing. And it says Unmanned Air Systems Pilot. And you have that.
Do you have to take a test to be a pilot?
Oh yeah, you got to take all.
So the one who bought again, I'm using the guy, probably a guy out there with a $300 Amazon something drone. He has to take a test before he can fly that one that he just unpacked from Amazon?
If he operates it under a recreational understanding, he does not need to take a test.
And recreational understanding means?
Not commercial, no compensation,
Mm-hmm.
and obeying the rules of what's called a community-based organization. And that is an indefinite reference to the Academy of Model Aeronautics. The AMA, Academy of Model Aeronautics, has a whole list of behaviors that you
Sorry,
must...
I'm not laughing at it, but it sounds very complicated.
It's just as complicated as PPUTRC, the name of our...
the name of the organization,
yeah,
that everybody's
right.
forgotten that it's
Right.
the test range for
Test
drones.
range, right. Yeah, it is a complicated situation, and that part is tough, again, for people to comprehend, because there's no place you can turn to get that intelligence quickly, and it's so much more complicated than riding a bicycle or using a cell phone or driving a car, that you're not really set for that. Not only that, I think the big issue that's hard for people to get is that their obligation is to never give up discovering information about this business and forever complying and finding ways to comply with potential issues that they have to deal with.
But you said if you're not a commercial pilot, you just take the thing out of the box and you automatically start flying it. Is that correct?
Under a recreational, well, let's see, go back to what we said before. You still have to register it.
Okay.
Okay, you got to get it. Got to go on the web.
It's got numbers on it or something?
Registration is what's called an FA number, the whole string of numbers that that FAA assigns to you. No different than a license plate, but about twice as long. And you have to put that somewhere identifiable on your vehicle, and that's step one. And then step two again is to read and understand, and then comply with these community-based organizational behavior requirements in terms of the flight parameters and getting landowners permission and avoiding interacting with wildlife or operating over traffic or over people. All the rules of common sense are embedded in that rule set, and you got to obey those. I would say that 90% of the people who, as you say, spend $300 on Amazon and get something don't even know that. They probably would comply if they knew that.
That's why you're on the TV show today.
That's perfect reason.
And by the way, I'm not pushing drones. You shouldn't say that, I'm going to go out and buy one now that Ward and Ralston have said, here's that easy. But that you should know what's going on in terms of the regulation or the re-regulation or the understanding of what this is. It's a new ballgame. It's a new technology. Even though there's always been model airplanes, they were always on strings, basically, right? And they flew around in circles. This is kind of an extension of model airplanes, except now they're different shapes and sizes. And
what's really taken place here is that model airplanes required a modeler, which is a tinkerer who would tinker and fix things, because they break all the time, and they're
balsa wood was weak.
Yeah, you had to glue them, fiberglass them, and do the electronics and such. But by the precision manufacture of small pieces, which is what's occurred, and the cell phone technology in terms of electronics and Bluetooth communication, all that functionality that the modeler used to do now comes in a package. So all you have to be able to do is open the package, and you're set to go.
And it's instant.
So all that complication got taken away from the user, so it's very easy to use these days.
So there's not a, like a dent doctor for a car, there's not a drone doctor for when your drone crashes. I guess I'm testing the institutionalization. Is there any entrepreneur out there who set up a drone repair business yet?
Yes.
There is?
Oh, yeah.
Where are they?
Mike Elliott, right here on Dillingham Boulevard in Honolulu, has a great
kidding.
operation.
What's the name of it? The Drone Doctor or something?
Drone Services Hawaii. Mike Elliott runs it, and he's got a unit on
this is not
one
a commercial
eye.
push. This is a question out of curiosity. It shows the institutionalization. Once the business community gets in and say, there's this, you find a need in a affiliate, obviously there's a need if he's open to a repair.
Absolutely. And what's really,
interesting.
from a technical perspective, what's really interesting about that is the repairs Mike is doing, and his partner George Purdy on Lanai would be unique to Hawaii because of our salt air environment and our hot tropical weather. So we would find failure modes in drones that are failing here different from what you might find in Yuma, Arizona, where it's very dry.
What are the common failure problems?
A lot of it is corrosion on the circuit boards and this sort of thing.
Because it's all the computer.
Yeah. But that, if I can suggest, that leads to another fantastic activity taking place. The FAA, again, I got to salute the FAA. They are a great bunch. They are really turning inside out and making this whole drone thing happen in a way that nobody ever imagined the FAA could. But that has led to the concept of industry-based standards. So industry is going to be held accountable to design and develop standards and then adhere to them. that are best practices and good engineering practices without the FAA telling them what to do. So this is a whole new world.
But Ted, wasn't the purpose of the grant that I had some of my fingerprints on was to have the integration of UASs, unmanned aerial vehicles, integrating and landing together at the commercial airports?
At the end state, that was what.
No,
that
I
was,
mean that was kind of like this is ultimately what we got to find. These toy ones are kind of preliminary sideshows to ultimately that one, which goes back to your FedEx, or was it UPS?
Take your pick. Yeah.
How much
Both
does the
of them.
plane weigh?
1.2 million pounds.
And that may be a drone-driven phenomenon.
Someday. Yep. Yes, exactly right. The purpose of that Pan-Pacific Unmanned Air Systems Test Range is to find where the rules have to be changed or the technology has to be adjusted in order to allow that integration to occur. And the reason Hawaii was picked, along with Oregon and Alaska, now Kansas and Mississippi are part of that same 5-state hui. We are considered the extreme environment states. We have like 8 or 9 climatic zones across all the states, all the way from the twisters in the Midwest, ice in Alaska, and hot tropical weather here. Plus we have the ko'olaus and the very steep mountains and the high wind shears and wind velocities and such. So we have pretty extreme climate. We have GPS areas where GPS drops out. We have areas where communication drops out because the mountains block the signal. So the FAA said, hey, you guys got to, taken together, you have some really nasty environments. We got to figure out how to make these things work.
So it wasn't our good looks, it was the challenge.
Sorry, you probably thought it was, and they might have told you that, but
because
it was really...
but Alaska were the darlings in this. They kind of nurtured us in the process. But what kind of cooperation have you got with Alaska or Kansas or
we
these
just
other guys?
had a meeting with our steering committee this last week in Dallas, of all places, and it's really going very well. Alaska has come out here. Alaska has certified the operations that Mike Elliott and George Purdy operate on Lanai, so we are now falling under the operational procedural standards of Alaska, which are tied to the FAA. So it's a really great business relationship all the way around.
How many years you got ahead of you before we actually come to the end product? Yes, we can integrate drones and we can integrate commercial aircraft at the Honolulu International Airport.
At Honolulu International Airport will be some time.
Okay, the Alaska Anchorage International Airport.
We'll probably start at a very remote strip like Lanai City Airport, for example.
Okay, pilot program.
Yep, and then work your way from the doable to the undoable, and find the pieces of technology necessary to get from one to the other.
Is it too costly to say this is going to be a drone airport and that's going to be normal airports? Oh, that could be one of your recommendations.
You certainly, at some point in time, like for crop dusting and this sort of thing, or for really remote operations, you could presumably have an operation that doesn't permit manned operations. That's very possible. I think integration makes a lot more sense. But that then leads to the question, okay, what does integration mean and how do you actually achieve it? And it's important we understand all that, because the way the FAA is thinking about it today is whatever the level of operation is at Honolulu Airport today, drones would have to be able to operate just like that. That is, whatever decisions pilots make, whatever accommodations are made for the weather changes or other piloting issues, the drones would have to be able to compensate and copy that style of operation. So whatever form of integration of airport you want to get into, you have to match what's already there.
So they can go on strike also then.
Yeah, I guess you could, yeah.
Before we run out of time, I wanted to get to the crystal ball. This is not science fiction. This is reality. This is coming. It's on its way, and this is a very serious research effort between all the universities in those 5 states that you mentioned, right? It's a university. It's a cerebral, practical, empirical-driven phenomenon which we are going to end up with in how many years. What's it going to look like? Crystal ball, Ted. What does it look like out there? What can people expect from? We start out with a little mini fun Amazon one to the big planes. Is this going to, my favorite Star Wars kind of people are zooming around? And
here's my answer to your question. And by the way, at UH, the work is done under the Applied Research Lab, which is sort of has access to all areas of the university. So even though the research lab is like self-contained, it has filaments out, connections to all the departments and such, and to all the campuses. So it's kind of like a whole campus activity. We're going to see a complete turnover from the drone configurations we have today to a much more reliable, standards-based system, probably even in a different radio frequency communication domain. And they're going to be the first set of drones that meet the new emerging requirements. There's going to be a meeting in Washington, D.C. just this coming Friday.
Are you going?
No, we're going to, I think we're going to have somebody that we are familiar with attending. But the professional societies in the country that generate standards are all getting together. And we're going to see the first look at what standards need to be in terms of structure, propulsion, communications, reliability, all that sort of thing will start happening. So what we see today out there is going to be, it'll just go away after it runs out, and it'll be replaced by a new generation that has different radio frequency characteristics, different operating characteristics, and is designed from the ground up as a drone to permit integration. That will be really interesting. But I would say the technology part is probably the easier part. The hard part, and I can't figure this out yet, what are we going to do with 500 drones over Honolulu? What are we going to do with 5,000 drones over Honolulu, running around dropping off pizzas and fishing bait and tennis bracelets and blood plasma? We got this whole layer of stuff floating around in the, you know, are we going to run it above the freeways?
There you heard it, your pizza is going to be coming by a drone. Alexa, we're almost running out of time. I say it as a side joke. For my birthday, my wife bought me one of those Amazon Echoes.
Yeah. Okay.
And Alexa tells me what time it is, what our temperature of our daughter's place is in Connecticut.
That's great.
And suddenly we've almost run out of time. Any closing comments or remarks that you want to mention to those who may be anticipating what you've talked about so far?
One of the things we'd like to do at the university again is be an outreach operation that takes any questions that people have or any complaints, any concerns, bring them into us.
Do you want to say your name and number, or that's going a little bit beyond what?
I'll give you my email address.
Okay, email address.
You ready for email address?
Ready for
Drum
it.
roll.
Drum.
Yeah. Okay. ted.ralston@gmail.com. Very simple.
That's easy enough to remember.
We'll go with that.
It's easier to remember than the title. Get to say the name of your organization again?
I remembered it half an hour ago, but I've forgotten it already.
We'll just
say University of Hawaii Applied Research Lab. That's a way simpler way to think of it.
You heard it here first. Ted Ralston and all you ever wanted to know about drones. Thank you for watching. I'm Representative Gene Ward. Thank you and aloha.